Keith Dennis, and I'm joined in a presentation with Hal Meier in a show called Off the Beaten Track. Today we're going to cover the subject of deception in the years ahead. Many people or institutions might wish to lead us astray, and we need to be aware of the possible deceptions. Our title is Signs, Miracles, and Lies to Deceive Even the Elect. Hal, tell us a little bit more about what you know about this subject.
Thank you, Keith. Remembering that title, Signs, Miracles, and Other Lies to Deceive Even the Elect. If we think that we are headed toward the end of an era, then you ought to pay some attention to what is said about that era and the end of it in Scriptures. And so in getting started, I want to read from some of the most pertinent passages that have to do with this. Let's start off with I think, Mark. Do you have that in front of you, available to you?
I do. All right. Okay, this is from Mark chapter 13. When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down or enter the house or take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be days of distress unequaled from the beginning, when God created the world until now, and never be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At the time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ," or "Look, there he is," do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and miracles to deceive the elect that were possible. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time.
Good, thank you very much. A couple of things I want to pick up out of that reading. One of them occurs right at the beginning, where it says, "When you see the abomination of desolation." This comes out of a famous passage describing something that was going on in among the people of Israel. At some point, the Seleucid Empire, the descendants of Alexander the Great, conquered a large part of that area. They took it over. They took over Israel, and in the Holy of Holies, in the temple, they brought in a pig and desecrated that with that vile, according to the Israelites, that vile image.
Now, our audience may not know, who are the Seleucids?
It's a family name, descendants of one of the generals of Alexander the Great. And Alexander, of course, died in about 300 or so BC. And when he did, he broke up his empire into 4 parts. One of those went to his general named Seleucid, and that then, 200 years later, he was still running Palestine. Okay?
The family.
Good.
The
family was. Yeah. Thank you for that. But the abomination was apparently so horrific, it sparked also a revolt and led to a overturn of the Seleucid control. So it was an important. So here it says, when you see something like that again, and I don't know how to interpret that. When you see something like an abomination taking place in having to do with the temple, and it looks like someone is there who should not be there, then you will know you are close to the time to this time of the end of the era. There is another incident, something especially important at the end of that passage, and it reads, "Do not believe, for there are false Christs and false prophets who appear and perform signs and miracles that could deceive even the elect, if that were possible." So here again, the image is of a great deception. This is not a small thing like, listen, you didn't get your, you didn't write out your checkbook on time, or something like that. This is not an effort to clean up your credit cards. Okay, this is a false Christ who appears at the end of time, and so imagine this. I'm keeping this image in your mind. Suppose the image is of a personality who says, "I am the Son of God." Now, you say, nobody's going to believe that. Well, we'll see if everybody is actually able to come through this unscathed.
Well, now, Hal, this passage sounds like there's more than one person trying to deceive. That we have multiple people trying to deceive here. Is that true?
Very good. False Christ, after all, it's a plural. No. I think it's always been anticipated that can happen, because there are a lot of crazy people in the world, not just one or two. So that's a very interesting point, and which will even make it even more complicated. How will then you say, well, my Christ is, of course, the true and correct one, and yours is not. And the third person says, not only that, but mine is the second coming. And the fourth person says, yes. So you see, the deceptions are unending. Good. Keith, thank you. Can you go on to the next session? I want you to read something from Second Thessalonians.
Okay, Hal, this is from chapter 2. Concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered to him, we ask you, brothers, not to become easily unsettled or alarmed by some prophecy, report, or letter supposed to have come from us, saying that the day of the Lord has already come. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God.
Good, thank you. So again, the same image of the abomination of desolation also occurs here from Paul in 2 Thessalonians, where it says, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Okay? So once more, the great deception to put that a personality, an entity, puts themselves in place of Christ Jesus is again specified. Now, it's really wise and well enough to say, okay, let's talk a little bit about how this might have occurred. And toward that end, I want to discuss just briefly in general things about deceptions. What's the problem? The big problem with deceptions is that they never end. There's, I say something now, I lie, and it's always a lie. Somewhere in that deception is a great lie. And the lie is whatever it happens to be. Then in order to protect themselves, because there will be an objection. Someone will say, nah, it can't be. And then you say, oh, well, it can be because here, guess what? I'm going to give you a second lie. and a third one, and a fourth one. And you keep online because it is now essential that you cover it up. So,
Sounds like trouble that I have sometimes with my wife and my little white lies.
I see. No. Not only won't we go into that, but that's a small matter compared to the deceptions that we have in mind here. What other people will say, and I've had this happen to me in preparation for this session. Someone said, why worry?
That's a good point. Why?
Why? I mean, after all, if something bad happens, then we'll know about it and there'll be plenty of time to do something about it. And not necessarily. And in fact, if you don't do something now with the small problem, what's going to happen? It's going to get worse. And after it gets worse, it's going to get permanent. And then it will be required, not just volunteer action on your part that will solve it, but you will be required to do so. Okay? That's the kind of deception and great tribulation that we're talking about. And so something has to be done before it gets worse. The other problem with deceptions in general is that they come from the least likely source. The reason that they work is that you think that the deception comes from someone you've always trusted.
An authority figure, for instance.
An authority of some sort. What authority would you have in mind? Well, a religious authority. Well, and there are a lot of people who would say, well, I don't know, if my pastor or priest or rabbi or somebody said this, I think I might tend to believe it. Okay? So that's one source. That kind of deception is very difficult to counteract, and we'll talk about that. What other kinds of deception? Well, you can have a deception from the government.
We can relate to that.
No, you can relate to that. Well, that's what a lot of people would say. Well, I wouldn't be. I believe I would not be worried about my government. Oh yeah, there are a lot of people worried about their government. Okay, what else? How about a great evil? There have been evil personalities. Hitler was certainly one of them. And there may be more and others and more difficult ones and more ferocious ones to come to pass. And so it is that, and that beast, by the way, of Adolf Hitler was trusted and praised and even worshipped by a lot of people a long time ago, a little while ago. Not a long time.
Of course, then you're talking about the megalomaniacs, but there's also the wolf in sheep's clothing, right?
Uh-huh.
As another deception.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, one of the great deceptions is to say, you see, I'm just here to help you. Of course, everybody is always just here to help you. And don't worry about it. We'll take care of the problems in the morning. All right. Well, let's continue. Let's go back to a specific kind of deception, which is it seems so obvious on the one hand, but it is so damning and destructive on the other that I really am not so sure that I can keep you with me on this subject. Here's it.
Okay, Hal, we're coming closer to our 15 minutes segment.
All right,
so
good.
I'm going to just have a stop because what you're saying is very, very interesting, and I want to hear more in our next segment. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm Keith Dennis, for those that are just joining us, and I'm talking with Hal Meier on the show that's called Off the Beaten Track. And we've been talking in our first segment about deceptions, and we're going to go on and continue talking about deceptions.
Good. Thank you, Keith. The one that we want to look at first is deceptions that might be due to religious authority. Now, at this point, I'm going to have to surround this with all sorts of quotes and unquotes and alleged and maybe and I'm not so sure, and because I don't really want to get in trouble with 1.2 billion Catholics and 750 million Protestants and almost 2 billion Muslims and Hindus. No. I prefer not to have that kind of difficulty, although you may always send me something on my email. Nevertheless, the story here begins with the fact that there is a very old prophecy coming out of the Hebrew Scriptures, which talks about the rebuilding of the temple. Now, as you are aware, the first temple was built by David, and the second one, actually, there wasn't. After that temple was torn down by the Babylonians, there was then when they returned to Jerusalem, they built another small temple, but somehow that didn't get counted. What got counted was the one built by Herod in about, the 1st century BC, and that was eventually destroyed by the Romans. So the prophecy, however, is still there. The temple will be rebuilt. Well, the only trouble with that is that it's supposed to be built in the place of the old temple, and the old temple was sitting on a rock on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, and that rock is now occupied by the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim shrine. So, what's the probability that the Muslims who love that rock and that dome, because this is where Muhammad ascended into heaven, and will do so again, what's the probability that they will willingly give up that sacred place of theirs so that the Jews can build a third temple? Well, it's not high, right? You got to agree. So, but that doesn't stop things. There's a small but radical and seriously determined group of people in Israel who wish to rebuild the temple as soon as the Dome of the Rock is gone.
Now, these are some of the real, I guess, would be right-winged.
I don't know what they have. Whatever. They're as close to the zealots as you can get, probably in Old Testament terms. But so they're looking forward to having that Dome of the Rock removed. Now, I'm not saying that they would wish to destroy it. I'm not saying that they would want to drop a bomb on it. But I am saying if some accident should occur in which that Dome of the Rock is somehow removed, then they are prepared, and I believe this to be true. They are prepared to rush in there with building materials and build the third temple. And in that third temple and on that rock, which is strategic, very important historically, on that rock they would then create and build and have all of the furniture that was also in the first temple.
So we're talking about maybe natural disasters, earthquakes, things like that they're prepared.
Sure. Maybe a plane flies over and it's even a plane from one of the Islamic countries. I mean,
plows
it doesn't have to be. It can happen in lots of ways, but they